imagine Switzerland. You cannot picture this land without the silent peaks of the Alps rising into the stars, or the mirror-still surface of Lake Geneva reflecting the last light of evening. You think of wooden chalets clinging to mountainsides, their windows glowing warm against the snow, and the gentle sound of cowbells drifting through valleys that time forgot. But tonight, we are not here for the postcards. We are here for the moment when the last funicular descends the mountain, when the chocolate shops close their doors, and when the old clock towers mark the hour with no one listening. We will walk the cobbled streets of Bern when they are empty, stand beside the Rhine when its waters flow unnoticed, and find the quiet corners where Switzerland keeps its oldest memories. And you will experience it all without leaving your bed. This evening, we are going to Switzerland. If you are ready to rest, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more journeys into sleep. And I would love to know, from which part of the world are you listening tonight? Let me know in the comments. Now, we begin. The night train pulls away from the station just as the last light fades from the western sky. Through the window, the landscape shifts from city lights to something older, something quieter. We are moving south through the darkness, and already the air feels different. Cooler, thinner, carrying the scent of pine and distant snow. Our first stop arrives without announcement. The train slows, and we step onto a platform so small it barely deserves the name. This is Lauterbrunnen, a village that sits at the bottom of a valley, so deep and narrow that waterfalls tumble down its walls on both sides. At this hour, the falls are silver ribbons in the moonlight, their sound a constant whisper that fills the valley like breath. The village itself seems to have grown from the earth rather than been built upon it. Every structure is wood, dark timber aged by centuries of weather, roofs weighted down with stones against the wind. There are no streetlights here, only the warm glow from windows where families have gathered for the evening. The air smells of wood smoke and the particular dampness that comes from living beside perpetual waterfalls. If you stand very still, you can feel the mist on your face, so fine it seems like the valley itself is breathing. Before the tourists discovered this place, before the trains came through, shepherds would bring their animals down from the high pastures each autumn, and the sound of hundreds of bells would echo off these cliffs for days. Now the bells are fewer, but their music remains. Drifting through the darkness like a lullaby, the mountains sing to themselves. We follow a narrow path away from the village, and the waterfalls grow louder. The largest of them, Staubach Falls, drops nearly 1,000 feet from the cliff above. And at night, it becomes something almost otherworldly. The water catches the moonlight and scatters it into 1,000 silver threads that seem to hang in the air rather than fall. The locals say that on certain nights, when the moon is full and the wind is still, you can see rainbows in the mist even in darkness. Pale ghosts of colour that flicker and vanish before you can quite believe them. The path is smooth stone, worn down by countless footsteps over countless years, and it winds alongside the stream that all these waterfalls eventually become. The sound of the water changes as we walk, sometimes a roar, sometimes a murmur, sometimes just the gentle percussion of drops hitting stone. In the 19th century, Poets would come here and write about the sublime power of nature, but they always came during the day. At night, the power becomes something gentler, more patient, as if the falls are only showing their true character when no one is watching. The path leads us deeper into the valley, where the cliffs press closer on both sides. Here, tucked against the rock face, stands a small chapel so old that no one remembers exactly when it was built. The wood has gone silver with age, and the door is never locked. Inside, the space smells of beeswax and old hymn books, and a single candle burns before a carved wooden cross. The walls are bare, except for one thing: a collection of small bells, each one hung on a nail, each one donated by a different family over the years. These are the bells that once hung around the necks of favorite cows, animals that had names and personalities, that the children loved and the farmers trusted to lead the herd. When the animals died, their bells came here, and now they hang silent in the darkness, a memorial to the old ways of living in these mountains. If you touch one very gently, it will ring with a sound so pure and clear, it seems to come from somewhere outside of time itself. Outside again, the valley has grown even quieter. We turn back toward the village, but our train is waiting at a different platform now, one we did not notice before. The cars are older, the seats upholstered in deep green velvet that has faded to the color of moss. As we pull away from Lauterbrunnen, the waterfalls fade behind us, their sound replaced by the rhythmic clicking of wheels on rails. The train climbs now, switching back and forth up the mountainside in a series of curves so tight you can almost see the end of the train from the front. With each turn, we rise higher and the air grows colder. Through the window, the lights of the valley below become fewer and smaller, until they are just pinpoints of gold scattered across the darkness. We are heading to the Jungfraujoch, the saddle of rock between two peaks where engineers carved a railway station from the solid mountain itself. The tunnel entrance appears suddenly, a dark mouth in the cliff face, and then we are inside the mountain, climbing through passages that were blasted from the rock more than 100 years ago. The workers who built this railway lived up here in the ice and stone for years at a time, carving their way upward, meter by meter, breathing thin air and burning candles for light. Some of them carved their names into the tunnel walls, and you can still see them if you know where to look. Names in German and Italian, dates from the early 1900s, small declarations that they were here, that they endured. When we emerge at the station, the world has changed completely. We are above the clouds now, standing on a platform carved from ice and rock at an elevation of more than 11,000 feet. The air is so cold, it hurts to breathe, and so clear that the stars seem close enough to touch. In the distance, the Aletsch glacier stretches away like a frozen river, its surface sculpted by wind into waves and ridges that catch the moonlight and glow pale blue. This glacier is the longest in the Alps. More than 14 miles of ice moving slowly but constantly down the mountain, carving the landscape as it has for thousands of years. If you press your ear against the ice, you can hear it moving. Creaks and groans and occasional sharp cracks as the glacier shifts and settles. The sound is like the mountain dreaming, talking to itself in a language older than words. There is a small observation deck here, glass walls protecting visitors from the wind, and we stand at the window, looking out over the glacier. In summer, this place is crowded with tourists. But tonight we are alone. The silence is so complete, it feels physical, like a presence in the room. The only sound is our own breathing and the occasional whisper of wind against the glass. Before this railway was built, almost no one came up here. The peaks were considered dangerous, even cursed, and the locals told stories of ice spirits and mountain ghosts. Now we know the peaks are just rock and snow, shaped by geology and weather. But standing here in the darkness, it is easy to understand why. People once imagined something more. The landscape feels alive in a way that has nothing to do with plants or animals. It is the aliveness of deep time, of forces so vast and slow that a human lifetime is just a blink. The train that takes us down the mountain is warmer, almost cozy, and we descend through the same tunnels. But somehow they feel different going down, as if we are returning from another world, rather than just another place. When we emerge at ground level, the valley feels almost tropical by comparison, even though the temperature is barely above freezing. We switch trains at a junction where 3 different lines meet, and now we are heading west toward Lake Geneva. The landscape shifts again as we travel. The high peaks give way to gentler mountains, and then to rolling hills covered in vineyards. Even in darkness, you can see the rows of grapevines marching up the slopes in perfect parallel lines, each vine carefully pruned and tied to its post. These are the Lavaux vineyards, terraced into the hillsides above Lake Geneva, in a pattern that has remained unchanged for 800 years. The stone walls that support each terrace were built by monks in the Middle Ages, fitted together without mortar, and they have held firm through centuries of rain and frost and summer heat. In autumn, when the grapes are harvested, the smell of fermentation drifts across these hills like perfume, sweet and slightly sharp, mixing with the scent of lake water and turning leaves. Now, in the depth of night, the vines are just dark shapes against darker earth, but the stone walls catch the moonlight and glow pale grey, marking out the terraces like contour lines on a map. Our train follows the shoreline of Lake Geneva now, running so close to the water that you could almost reach out and touch it. The lake at night is a sheet of black glass, perfectly still, reflecting the lights from the towns on the opposite shore. This is one of the largest lakes in Western Europe, more than 40 miles long and nearly 9 miles wide at its broadest point, deep enough in places that the bottom has never been accurately measured. The Romans knew this lake. They called it Lacus Lemanus, and they built villas along its shores where wealthy citizens could escape the summer heat of the lowlands. Some of those villas still exist, buried under centuries of new construction, their mosaic floors waiting in the darkness beneath medieval churches and modern hotels. The lake itself is fed by the Rhone River, which enters at the eastern end as a milky blue torrent of glacial meltwater and emerges at the western end clear and cold, filtered by 60 miles of deep water. In winter, when the weather is very cold and very still, the lake can partially freeze, and the ice forms in perfect geometric patterns, hexagons within hexagons, like snowflakes the size of dinner plates, stretching from shore to shore. We pass through the town of Vevey without stopping, though the platform is lit and empty, waiting. Vevey sits at the point where the lake is widest, and for centuries, it was a market town where farmers from the surrounding valleys would bring their milk and cheese to sell. The tradition of Swiss chocolate making began here, in small shops where confectioners experimented with mixing cocoa and milk and sugar in different proportions, trying to create something smoother and richer than anyone had tasted before. They succeeded, and now those small shops have become factories. But a few of the original buildings remain, their facades decorated with painted signs showing wheels of cheese and bars of chocolate, fading now, but still visible if you know where to look. At night, the town smells faintly of cocoa, a ghost of the smell that once filled these streets every day. And if you walk along the waterfront, you can find the fountain where workers used to wash their hands after long shifts in the chocolate houses. The stone basin is worn smooth by a century of use. The train turns inland now, following a valley that leads away from the lake and up into the mountains again. We are heading to Gruyères, a village so perfectly preserved it seems like a stage set, as if the modern world has agreed to simply pretend it does not exist. The village sits on a hill, surrounded by walls that date back to the 13th century, and only one road leads up to the main gate. At night, with the gate closed and the streets empty, Gruyères becomes a place out of time. The cobblestones are original, fitted together so precisely that water runs off them without pooling, and they have been polished smooth by 700 years of footsteps. The houses lean against each other like old friends, their walls whitewashed and their shutters painted in shades of green and blue that have faded to soft pastels. Every building has a small carved sign hanging above its door, a boot for the cobbler, a pretzel for the baker, a key for the locksmith. Symbols from an age when most people could not read. These signs creak gently in the night breeze, the only sound in the empty streets. At the top of the hill stands the castle, its walls rising straight from the rock, as if they had grown there rather than been built. The castle is older than the village, older than the walls, old enough that its earliest stones were laid by counts whose names have been forgotten. Inside, the rooms are furnished as they would have been in the 17th century. Heavy wooden tables, tapestries showing hunting scenes, fireplaces large enough to stand in. But the most remarkable room is the smallest, a chapel tucked into one of the towers, its walls covered entirely in frescoes painted by a monk who lived here in the 1400s. The paintings show scenes from the Bible, but they are set in these mountains, with Swiss villages and alpine peaks in the background. The monk painted what he knew, and so the shepherds watching their flocks by night are watching over Swiss sheep in Swiss pastures, and the journey to Bethlehem leads through a landscape that looks exactly like the valley outside the window. The colors have faded over the centuries, but you can still see them in the moonlight that filters through the narrow windows. Blues and reds and golds that glow softly in the darkness, like embers of a fire that never quite goes out. Below the castle, in a building that was once a merchant's house, there is a dairy where they still make Gruyère cheese in the traditional way. The process takes months and requires a precision that borders on ritual. Fresh milk from specific breeds of cows is heated in enormous copper vats, then mixed with rennet and left to curdle. The curds are cut and stirred and pressed, then aged in cellars where the temperature and humidity never vary by more than a degree. The wheels of cheese sit on wooden shelves in the darkness, turned and brushed by hand every few days, developing their flavor slowly, patiently, the way everything worth having develops. The cellars smell of milk and salt, and the particular earthy sweetness that comes from bacterial cultures working their slow transformation. In the oldest part of the cellar, there are wheels that have been aging for more than 2 years, their rinds hard and golden, their interiors creamy and complex. If you taste a sliver of this cheese, it seems to contain the entire landscape, the grass of the mountain meadows, the flowers that bloom there in spring, the minerals in the soil, all of it concentrated and preserved in this dense, flavorful substance. Our train is waiting at the bottom of the hill, and as we descend the narrow road, the village above us becomes a silhouette against the stars. Its walls and towers, dark shapes that could be from any century. We are traveling east now, toward the center of the country, and the landscape becomes gentler, the mountains lower and more rounded. This is the Emmental, a region of green hills and dairy farms, the place where another famous cheese was born. The farms here are enormous wooden structures, 3 stories high, with living quarters on the upper floors and space for animals and equipment below. The roofs extend far beyond the walls, creating deep overhangs that protect the buildings from rain and snow. These roofs are weighted down with stones. Hundreds of smooth river rocks are laid in overlapping rows, each one carefully chosen for its size and shape. In strong winds, the stones shift and settle, making a sound like distant thunder. And the farmers say they can tell the strength of a storm by the way the roof rocks speak. In the Emmental, they make cheese with holes in it, the cheese that cartoons have taught the world to associate with Switzerland. The holes are not cut or punched. They form naturally during the aging process, created by bacteria that release carbon dioxide as they consume the lactose in the milk. The size and distribution of the holes depends on dozens of factors: the temperature of the room, the composition of the milk, the specific strains of bacteria present, the way the curds were cut and stirred. Master cheesemakers learn to control these factors through years of apprenticeship, developing an intuition that borders on telepathy. They can tell by the smell of the milk what kind of cheese it'll make. They can tell by the sound the curd makes when they cut it whether the temperature is correct. They work in silence most of the time, moving through the steps of the process with the efficiency of long practice, their hands remembering what their minds might forget. The train carries us through the Emmental in darkness, past farms where lights burn in the upper windows and smoke rises from chimneys. These are not tourist attractions. They are working farms where families have lived for generations, milking cows and making cheese, and living according to rhythms that have changed very little in hundreds of years. The cows themselves are beautiful, small by modern standards, with white faces and brown bodies, bred not for maximum milk production, but for the quality of that milk, its butterfat content and protein levels, and the way it responds to the cheese-making process. In summer, these cows live in the high meadows, grazing on wildflowers and herbs that flavor their milk in subtle ways. In winter, They come down to the barns and eat hay cut from those same meadows, and the milk tastes different but no less complex, like a wine that expresses the character of a particular vintage. We cross a river, the Aare, and follow it upstream toward the city of Bern. The river here is green, an almost unnatural shade of turquoise that comes from glacial minerals suspended in the water, and it flows fast and cold, cutting through the landscape like a liquid blade. Bern sits in a loop of this river, the old city occupying a peninsula of land surrounded on three sides by water. The train crosses a bridge and brings us to the station, and from there we walk into the medieval heart of the city. Bern is famous for its arcades, covered walkways that run along both sides of every major street, their vaulted ceilings supported by stone pillars that have stood for 600 years. The arcades were built to protect merchants and their goods from weather, and they turn the streets into a continuous covered market where you could walk for miles without ever stepping into rain or sun. At night, the arcades are empty, their shops shuttered and dark, but the pillars remain, casting repeating shadows in the light of the old-fashioned street lamps. The cobblestones beneath our feet are worn into smooth channels where centuries of cartwheels have passed, and the walls of the buildings show their age in 1,000 small details. Carved keystones above doorways, iron rings for tying horses, small niches where guards once stood watch. In the center of the city stands a clock tower, the Zeitglocke, and it is one of the oldest working clocks in the world. The mechanism inside was built in the 1400s, an arrangement of gears and weights and escapements so precisely engineered that it still keeps accurate time more than 500 years later. Every hour, the clock puts on a show. Mechanical figures emerge from doors in the tower, dancing and turning and striking bells. A medieval automaton performing the same routine it has performed thousands of times before. At night, with no audience, the performance continues regardless. The figures move through their dance. The bells ring out over the sleeping city, and then everything returns to silence. The clock's face glows faintly in the darkness, its hands moving with a steadiness that feels almost defiant, as if to say that time continues regardless of who is watching, that the world keeps turning whether we pay attention or not. We leave the city through the eastern gate and walk along the river. The path here is called the Bärengraben, the bear pit. Though there are no bears anymore, they were moved to a sanctuary years ago where they have more space and better lives. But for centuries, Bern kept bears as a symbol of the city, and visitors would come to watch them and feed them and take their pictures. The pit itself remains, a deep, stone-lined depression beside the river. And if you stand at the edge and look down, you can imagine the bears that once lived there, pacing the perimeter or sleeping in the sun. The city's name comes from bears, either from a bear that the founder killed, or from the bear on a coat of arms, or from some older word that has been forgotten. And they remain part of Bern's identity, even in their absence, a reminder that cities carry their histories, whether those histories are convenient or not. The train is waiting again, and now we are traveling north, toward Basel. The landscape here is lower and flatter, the mountains reduced to distant shapes on the horizon. We pass through farmland where corn grows in summer and wheat in winter. where the fields are so carefully maintained they look like gardens. The Swiss have perfected the art of making the most of limited space. Every square meter is planned and used. Every hedgerow is trimmed. Every stone wall follows the property line exactly. This is not wild country. This is country that has been tamed and organized and made productive through centuries of patient labor. Basel announces itself first as a glow on the horizon, then as distinct light, then as streets and buildings appearing out of the darkness. The city sits at the point where Switzerland meets France and Germany, where the Rhine River makes a sharp turn northward and becomes navigable to the sea. This geography made Basel wealthy. It was a place where goods could be transferred from river barges to carts, and from carts to barges again, where merchants from 3 countries met to trade and negotiate and make deals. That wealth built the city we see today, a place of grand merchant houses and elaborate guild halls, each one trying to outdo its neighbours in size and decoration. The train station in Basel is a curious thing. It is actually 3 stations in one building, each one belonging to a different country. There is a Swiss section, a French section, and a German section. And if you are not careful, you can walk from one to another without realizing you have crossed a border. The building itself is a masterpiece of early 20th century architecture, all glass and iron and Art Nouveau curves, designed to impress visitors with Switzerland's modernity and efficiency. At night, the glass ceiling glows with soft light, and the vast hall feels like a cathedral dedicated to travel, to the romance of departure and arrival, to the idea that anywhere might be possible if you just choose the right platform. We walk from the station to the old town, crossing the Rhine on a bridge that has stood here in one form or another since Roman times. The current bridge is made of stone, its arches perfectly symmetrical, its surface wide enough for cars and pedestrians and the occasional bicycle. Below us, the river moves fast and dark, carrying water from the Alps to the North Sea, indifferent to borders and human geography. In summer, people swim in the Rhine here, letting the current carry them downstream before climbing out and walking back to do it again. They have been doing this for generations, and there are waterproof bags specially made for the purpose, bright orange floats that you pack your clothes into and pull along beside you as you swim. At night, the practice seems slightly mad, but in the right season and the right light, it is just another way that people find joy in this landscape, another small ritual that connects them to the place they live. The old town of Basel is quieter than Bern, more serious somehow, as if the weight of history sits heavier here. The buildings are tall and narrow, built of stone in shades of grey and pale yellow, their facades decorated with elaborate frescoes that have faded until they are more suggestion than image. Some of these buildings are former merchants' houses. Others are guild halls, where craftsmen once met to regulate their trades and train their apprentices. The guilds are gone now, replaced by modern unions and professional associations. But the buildings remain, converted into offices and apartments and restaurants, their interiors still showing traces of their original purpose. Great halls with carved wooden ceilings, narrow staircases leading to upper floors, cellars with vaulted ceilings where goods were once stored. Near the centre of town stands the Basel Minster, a cathedral built of red sandstone that seems to glow in the lamplight. The church was built in stages over several centuries, each generation adding to what came before, and you can see the progression in the architecture. Romanesque arches giving way to Gothic points, plain walls replaced by elaborate tracery, simple windows expanding into complex patterns of stained glass. The church has been rebuilt twice after earthquakes, and each time the builders tried to recreate what was lost while also adding improvements, so that the building is both a restoration and a renovation, a copy that is somehow more authentic than the original. Inside, the stone is cool, and the air smells of old books and candle wax. The floor is paved with tombstones, the graves of bishops and nobles and wealthy merchants, their effigies carved in stone and worn almost flat by centuries of footsteps. In the darkness, these carvings are just shapes, but if you kneel and trace them with your fingers, you can feel the outline of faces and hands, and the folds of robes, the ghost of someone who died 500 years ago and thought they would be remembered forever. We leave Basel as the first hint of dawn touches the eastern sky, though it will be hours yet before the sun appears over the mountains. The train takes us southeast now, following the Rhine upstream toward its source. The river grows narrower and faster as we travel, changing from the broad commercial waterway we saw in Basel to something wilder and more urgent. The valley closes in, the mountains rising on both sides, and we are back in the high country again, back where Switzerland feels most like itself. Our destination is Chur, the oldest city in Switzerland, a place that is already old when the Romans arrived and found people living here, speaking a language no one else could understand. That language is still spoken in these valleys, Romansh, a descendant of the Latin the Romans brought, but evolved in isolation into something unique. There are only a few thousand speakers left, and the language is fractured into different dialects, depending on which valley you are in. But it survives, taught in schools and used in daily life. A link to a past that predates nations and borders and all the modern ways of organizing the world. Chur itself is tiny, barely more than a large town, but it has the feel of a place that has seen everything. The streets are narrow and winding, following paths that were laid out in medieval times, or earlier, and they lead eventually to a cathedral that sits on the highest point in the city. The cathedral is Romanesque, built of local stone in the 12th century, and it has a simplicity that later Gothic churches lack. The walls are thick and plain, the windows small and deeply set, the interior dim and cool even on the brightest day. There is a crypt beneath the main floor, and if you descend the narrow stairs, you enter a space that feels like the inside of the mountain itself. Low vaulted ceilings, stone pillars, air that has not moved in centuries. The crypt holds relics of saints whose names are no longer remembered, bones in gold and silver reliquaries, testaments to a faith that saw the physical remains of holy people as conduits to the divine. Outside the cathedral, the city is waking slowly. Lights appear in windows. Smoke begins to rise from chimneys. A cat crosses the street, pauses to clean its paw, then continues on its way. We walk through the streets as they empty of night and begin to fill with day, and we make our way back to the train. Our next stop is St. Gallen, a city that exists because of books. In the 8th century, an Irish monk named Gallus came to this valley and built a hermitage. And around that hermitage, a monastery grew, and around that monastery, a city. The monastery's library became one of the most important in Europe, a repository of manuscripts and early printed books, a place where knowledge was preserved through centuries of plague and war and upheaval. The library still exists, housed in a building of such extraordinary beauty that it seems almost impossible that it could be real. The room is Baroque, built in the 18th century when the monastery was wealthy and powerful and wanted to show the world what faith and learning could accomplish together. The ceiling is covered in frescoes, showing allegories of wisdom and virtue, painted in colours so vivid they seem to glow. The shelves are carved walnut, polished to a deep shine, and they hold books that are centuries old, bound in leather and vellum, their pages hand-lettered by monks who dedicated their entire lives to copying texts they would never fully understand. To enter the library, you must put on slippers over your shoes, soft felt slippers that protect the wooden floor from the wear of countless visitors. The floor itself is inlaid wood, a pattern of different coloured timbers arranged in geometric designs, and it has been polished by generations of those slippers until it gleams like glass. The room smells of old paper and leather and the particular mustiness that comes from books that are older than anyone alive. There is a silence here that feels sacred, not because of religion, but because of what this place represents. The stubborn insistence that knowledge matters, that preserving the past is worth the effort, that some things should last beyond a single human lifetime. Among the treasures in this library is a manuscript of the poem Waltharius, written in the 10th century, one of the oldest examples of Germanic epic poetry. The manuscript is written in Latin, but tells a Germanic story, and it includes illustrations in the margins, small drawings of warriors and dragons and battles, sketched by a scribe who was supposed to be copying text, but could not resist adding his own visual commentary. These drawings are crude but charming, full of energy and humour, and they remind us that even in the Middle Ages, even in monasteries dedicated to solemn work, people were still people, still finding ways to express themselves and leave their mark. The train takes us west from St. Gallen, and the landscape opens up again into rolling hills and farmland. We pass through small villages where every house has a vegetable garden and a neat stack of firewood beside the door. These are not tourist destinations. These are places where people live quietly, working and raising families and participating in the small rituals of community life. Church on Sundays, festivals in summer, markets where everyone knows everyone else. In a world that feels increasingly global and connected, these villages exist in a different rhythm, slower and more local, tied to seasons and weather and the particular character of their piece of land. We arrive in Zurich just as full daylight comes, though the city still feels sleepy, not yet awake to its busy modern self. Zurich is Switzerland's largest city, a centre of banking and business and international commerce. But it began as something much simpler. A customs post where the Romans collected taxes from boats travelling on the lake and the Limmat River that flows from it. Over time, that customs post became a town, and that town became a city. And now Zurich is a place where medieval churches stand next to glass office towers, where trams run on cobblestone streets, where the past and present exist in an uneasy but functional harmony. The old guild halls of Zurich are among the most beautiful buildings in the city, each one representing a different trade. The weavers, the merchants, the boatmen, the smiths. These guilds controlled their trades completely, deciding who could practice a craft, setting prices and quality standards, training apprentices and enforcing rules. They were powerful institutions, and they built headquarters that reflected that power. Massive stone structures with elaborate facades, ceremonial halls with painted ceilings, wine cellars that could hold thousands of bottles. Most of these buildings are now restaurants or event spaces, but they retain their character. And when you step inside, you can still sense the seriousness with which these craftsmen took their work, the pride they felt in what they did and what they built. Along the Limmat River, the water is so clear you can see fish swimming near the bottom, even though this is the center of a major city. The Swiss have strict laws about water quality, and they enforce them rigorously, so that rivers that were once polluted and dead have come back to life, filled again with trout and grayling and the occasional salmon that has made its way upstream from the Rhine. In summer, people swim in the Limmat, jumping from wooden platforms built along the banks and letting the current carry them downstream before climbing out and walking back to jump again. It is the same ritual we saw in Basel, adapted to a different river. Another way that people in this country find joy in cold water and strong currents. We leave Zurich by train again, heading south into the mountains one more time. This journey takes us to Lugano, a city that sits on the border between Switzerland and Italy, a place where the architecture is Italian, but the punctuality is Swiss. The train line to Lugano is one of the engineering marvels of the world, boring through mountains via tunnels that took decades to complete, crossing valleys on viaducts that seem too delicate to hold a train. The journey is mostly underground, and when you emerge from one tunnel, and before you enter the next, the views are so sudden, and they feel almost unreal. Green valleys far below, mountain peaks all around, waterfalls tumbling down cliff faces. Lugano itself sits beside a lake of the same name, a body of water shaped like a wishbone, its arms stretching between mountains. The lake is warm enough to swim in during summer, fed by streams but also warmed by the sun reflecting off the surrounding peaks. And it has a Mediterranean character that feels out of place in Switzerland. Palm trees grow along the waterfront. Cafes serve espresso and gelato. The language spoken in the streets is Italian, or a Swiss version of it, musical and rapid. This is the Ticino, the Italian-speaking canton of Switzerland, a region that shares more culturally with Milan than with Bern or Zurich, but that remains firmly Swiss in its organization and efficiency and cleanliness. The old town of Lugano is a maze of narrow streets and stone staircases, built on the hillside above the lake. The buildings are painted in shades of ochre and terracotta, their shutters green or blue, their roofs red tile instead of the wooden shingles you see in the rest of Switzerland. There are churches here, decorated with frescoes, their walls showing scenes of saints and miracles painted in the Renaissance style, bright and full of movement. The churches smell of incense and old stone, and their floors are paved with memorials to wealthy families who donated money in exchange for prominent burial places. their names still visible in worn brass letters. Above the city, reached by a funicular railway, stands the church of Santa Maria degli Angioli, and inside this church is one of the great treasures of Swiss art, a fresco of the Passion of Christ painted by Bernardino Luini in the early 1500s. The fresco covers an entire wall, showing Christ's crucifixion and the events leading up to it, painted with a delicacy and emotional intensity that makes the 500-year gap between then and now feel like nothing. The colors have faded, but the composition remains powerful, and you can stand before it and feel the artist's hand, see the choices he made about which details to include and which to leave out, understand the devotion that went into creating something meant to move people closer to God. The train that takes us away from Lugano descends through more tunnels and finally emerges in the lower valleys where Switzerland meets the flatlands of northern Italy. But we do not cross that border. Instead, we turn west, following the route of the Gotthard Pass, one of the most important mountain crossings in European history. For centuries, this was the main route connecting northern and southern Europe, and whoever controlled the pass controlled trade between Germany and Italy. The current road and rail tunnels make the crossing easy, but before these existed, travelers had to climb up and over the pass on narrow paths, exposed to weather and rock slides and bandits. Many died trying. The old paths still exist, and if you walk them, you can see the remains of the hospitality houses that once stood every few miles, places where travelers could find shelter and food and rest before continuing their journey. The Gotthard Base Tunnel is the longest rail tunnel in the world, more than 35 miles of track running straight through the heart of the Alps. The tunnel took 17 years to build, boring through rock under mountains more than a mile high, dealing with heat and water and unstable geology, losing men to accidents and creating a memorial to those men at the tunnel's midpoint, where two small chapels face each other, one for those traveling north and one for those traveling south, places to pause and remember that human ambition always has a cost. We emerge from the tunnel in the valley of the Reuss River, where the water runs fast and milky with glacial silt. This is the Uri, one of the original 3 cantons that formed the Swiss Confederation in the 13th century, a place where Swiss nationalism was born from resistance to outside control. The people here tell stories of Wilhelm Tell, the legendary archer who shot an apple off his son's head and started a rebellion against Austrian rule, though historians disagree about whether Tell actually existed or was invented later to give the rebellion a human face. What matters is not whether the story is true, but what it represents. The idea that small communities can resist larger powers, that freedom is worth fighting for, that the mountains themselves will shelter those who defend their independence. Near the town of Altdorf, there is a monument to Tell, a statue showing him with his crossbow and his son, frozen in the moment before he takes the shot. The statue is bronze, weathered green by rain and time, and it stands in a square that is otherwise ordinary, surrounded by shops and offices and the everyday life of a small town. Children play around the statue's base. Tourists take photographs, and life continues as if this symbol of resistance is now just part of the furniture, just another thing to walk past on the way to somewhere else. The train carries us down the valley to Lake Lucerne, and we arrive in the city of Lucerne itself as evening begins to fall again. This is where we began, in a sense. Back at lake level. Back where the mountains meet the water. Back in the heart of Switzerland. Lucerne is famous for its Chapel Bridge, a covered wooden walkway that crosses the Reuss River at the point where it leaves Lake Lucerne. The bridge was built in the 1400s, and its roof is decorated with painted panels showing scenes from Swiss history and legend, each one a small work of art, though many of the originals were lost in a fire in the 1990s and had to be replaced with copies. The bridge connects the old town with the new, and at night, with lamps hung along its length, it glows against the dark water like a string of lanterns marking a path across the void. We walk across the bridge slowly, pausing to look at the paintings that remain, reading the small plaques that explain what each one shows. Some depict battles, others show the founding of the Swiss Confederation. Still others illustrate scenes from the lives of Lucerne's patron saints. Together, they tell the story of how this place sees itself, the narrative it chooses to remember and repeat, the version of history that has been simplified and mythologized and turned into something that can be taught to children and tourists. It is not the whole truth, but it is a truth, and perhaps that is the best we can hope for. That the stories we tell about ourselves are at least partially accurate, at least well-intentioned, at least honest about the values we want to uphold. At the end of the bridge stands the water tower, an octagonal stone structure that was once part of the city's fortifications. The tower has served many purposes over the centuries. Watchtower, prison, treasury, torture chamber. And now it is simply a landmark, a thing to photograph and admire and use as a reference point when giving directions. Inside, the floors are connected by a narrow spiral staircase, worn smooth by countless footsteps, and the windows are small slits designed for archers to shoot through. From the top, you can see the whole city spread out below, and the lake beyond, and the mountains rising in the distance like a wall between this world and some other. We leave Lucerne heading east one final time, traveling toward the small Principality of Liechtenstein, technically not part of Switzerland, but so closely connected to it that the border is almost theoretical. Liechtenstein is tiny, about 25 miles long and 8 miles wide, and it sits in the Rhine Valley between Switzerland and Austria, a remnant of the Holy Roman Empire that somehow survived into the modern era. The country has no airport and no army, uses Swiss currency and Swiss customs, and allows free movement across its borders. In many ways, it functions as an extension of Switzerland, though it maintains its own government and its own identity. The capital, Vaduz, is small enough that you can walk from one end to the other in 20 minutes. The prince's castle sits on a hill above the town, a medieval fortress that has been renovated and expanded so many times, it is hard to say what is original and what is addition. The prince still lives there, making Liechtenstein one of the few countries in Europe where the head of state actually resides in the official residence. The castle is not open to the public, but you can walk up to the walls and look out over the valley, seeing the same view that the prince sees each morning, and wonder what it must be like to rule over such a small territory. to know every village and almost every citizen, to have responsibility for a place that could fit inside many American counties with room to spare. In the center of Vaduz stands the Parliament building, a modern structure of glass and concrete that looks out of place among the older buildings around it. Inside, the Parliament has 25 members, elected by proportional representation, and they meet several times a year to debate and pass laws. The building has a public gallery where citizens can watch the proceedings, and the sessions are broadcast on radio and television, making Liechtenstein one of the most transparent governments in the world. When you have fewer than 40,000 citizens, transparency is easier. Everyone knows everyone else, or knows someone who knows them, and it becomes impossible to hide incompetence or corruption. The system works because it is small enough that people can still imagine it working, can still see themselves as participants rather than spectators. Our train leaves Liechtenstein and crosses back into Switzerland, heading toward the city of St. Moritz, the most famous ski resort in the world, though skiing is not what brings us here tonight. St. Moritz sits in a high valley called the Engadin, a place of extraordinary beauty, even by Swiss standards, where the air is so clear and dry that you can see for 50 miles on a good day. The valley floor is more than 6,000 feet above sea level, making this one of the highest inhabited regions in Europe. And the altitude gives the light a quality that artists have tried for centuries to capture, a brightness and clarity that makes colors more vivid and shadows more defined. In the 19th century, wealthy Europeans came to St. Moritz for their health, believing that the mountain air and mineral springs could cure tuberculosis and other ailments. Hotels were built, grand structures in the style of the time, all turrets and balconies and elaborate woodwork. Some of those hotels still exist, though they have been renovated many times, and they retain something of their original character. A formality and elegance that feels almost archaic now, as if the guests are expected to dress for dinner and speak in quiet voices and observe rules of behavior that no longer apply anywhere else. The mineral springs that attracted those early visitors still bubble up from deep in the earth, heated by geothermal activity and rich in minerals. Iron, sulfur, calcium, magnesium. The water tastes metallic and slightly bitter, and it stains everything it touches rust orange, but people believed it had healing properties, and perhaps it did, or perhaps it was just the placebo effect, combined with rest and good food and time away from the stresses of urban life. The springs have been captured and channeled into baths and spas, and you can still bathe in that water today, lying in a warm pool while snow falls outside, breathing air that smells of sulfur and watching steam rise into the cold mountain atmosphere. Near St. Moritz, there is a lake that freezes solid every winter, and on that ice, they hold horse races, polo matches, and even cricket games, spectacles that draw crowds from around the world. The ice is thick enough to support horses and spectators and temporary grandstands, and the surface is groomed smooth every morning, creating a playing field that is perfectly flat and perfectly level. The races are elegant and slightly absurd, horses galloping across ice, their hooves fitted with special shoes for traction, pulling sleds where the drivers crouch low and lean into the turns. It is the kind of thing that could only happen in a place where wealth and winter and a certain eccentric creativity all come together, where the ordinary rules of what is practical or sensible do not quite apply. The train takes us down from St. Moritz via the Bernina Pass, one of the most beautiful rail journeys in the world. The line was built in the early 1900s without using tunnels or cograil systems. It climbs through a series of curves and loops, gaining elevation gradually, following the natural contours of the land. At the highest point, more than 7,000 feet up, the train crosses a viaduct that seems to hang in mid-air, a stone bridge arching over a deep valley, with glaciers visible on both sides. The view is so overwhelming that the train slows down at this point, giving passengers time to take it in, and everyone goes silent, even the people who have done this journey many times before. Descending on the Italian side of the pass, the landscape changes. The mountains become softer, the vegetation more lush, the architecture more Mediterranean. We pass through the village of Poschiavo, where the houses are painted pink and yellow, and the church has a bell tower that leans slightly to one side. This is still Switzerland, but it feels different, influenced by proximity to Italy, by lower elevation, by warmer weather, and different traditions. The people here speak Italian and eat polenta and worship in churches decorated with Baroque frescoes, but they carry Swiss passports and pay taxes to Bern and organize their lives with Swiss precision. Our final destination is Zermatt, the village at the base of the Matterhorn, perhaps the most recognizable mountain in the world. Zermatt is car-free, accessible only by train, and the streets are quiet in a way that modern towns rarely are. No engines, no honking, just the sound of footsteps and voices and the occasional electric taxi humming past. The village exists because of the mountain. Before mountaineering became popular, this was just a poor farming community where people struggled to survive in a harsh climate. Then climbers came for the Matterhorn, and everything changed. The Matterhorn itself is a pyramid of rock nearly 15,000 feet high. Its four faces almost perfectly aligned with the cardinal directions. It is beautiful in a way that is almost threatening, too steep and too perfect to seem entirely natural. The first ascent was made in 1865 by a team led by Edward Whymper, and the climb ended in tragedy when 4 of the 7 climbers fell to their deaths on the descent. Their bodies were recovered and buried in the Zermatt cemetery, and their graves are still there, marked by simple stones, visited by climbers who understand that mountains always have the final word. We do not climb the Matterhorn. Instead, we take a different train, a cog railway that climbs up to the Gornergrat, a rocky ridge more than 10,000 feet high, with views of the Matterhorn and 28 other peaks over 13,000 more feet. The train runs even in winter, even at night. Though there are few passengers this late, the journey takes about 40 minutes, climbing through pine forests that thin and disappear as we rise above the tree line, emerging into a landscape of rock and ice and snow that glows pale blue in the starlight. At the top, there is an observation platform and a small hotel, both closed at this hour, but the platform is accessible, and we stand there in the cold, looking at the mountains arranged around us like a cathedral built by geology. The wind is strong and constant, and it makes a sound like breathing, a low whistle that rises and falls. The temperature is well below freezing, cold enough that exposed skin hurts within seconds. But we stay anyway, because moments like this are rare. Moments when you are so far from everyday life that the concerns and anxieties that usually fill your mind simply fall away, replaced by something simpler and older, a wordless awareness of scale and time and your own smallness in the face of forces that do not know you exist and would not care if they did. When we finally turn to go back down, the stars have begun to fade in the east. The train waits at the platform, warm and lit, and we board and begin the descent. Through the windows, the landscape lightens gradually, shifting from black to grey to the pale blue of early morning. By the time we reach Zermatt again, the first sunlight is touching the peak of the Matterhorn, turning the snow golden, and the village is beginning to wake. Lights in windows, smoke from chimneys, the day beginning again as it has for generations. But we are not here for the day. We are here for what comes after, for the moment when the work is done and the tourists have left and the mountains return to themselves. We are here for the silence and the stillness and the particular quality of rest that only comes when you have travelled far enough that you cannot quite remember where you started. The night train is waiting at the station, and we board one last time. The cars are almost empty. Just a few other travellers, all of us quiet, all of us tired in the good way that comes from seeing things worth seeing. The train pulls out of Zermatt and begins the long journey back, retracing the route we took, passing through the same valleys and tunnels and villages. But somehow everything looks different now, changed by familiarity, softened by memory. Sleep is close now. You can feel it in the heaviness of your eyelids, in the way your thoughts are beginning to drift and scatter like leaves in a gentle wind. The rhythm of the train has become part of your breathing, part of your heartbeat, and you are no longer sure where the motion of the train ends and the motion of your own body begins. Outside the window, Switzerland continues its ancient patterns. Somewhere, a baker is lighting his ovens for the morning bread. Somewhere, a farmer is walking to his barn to begin the milking. Somewhere, church bells are ringing the hour, their sound carrying across valleys that have heard those same bells for centuries. The country is waking, but you are not part of that waking. You are moving in the opposite direction, sinking deeper into rest, letting go of consciousness one breath at a time. The train carries you through a tunnel, and in the darkness, you lose track of time. When you emerge, the landscape outside has changed, though you cannot quite say how. The mountains are different mountains, or perhaps they are the same mountains seen from a different angle. The villages have different names, or perhaps they are the same villages you have already passed. It does not matter. The journey is what matters, not the destination. The motion is what matters, not the arrival. Another tunnel, another stretch of track, another moment of letting go. Your fellow passengers have fallen silent. Some are sleeping, their heads tilted against windows or resting on folded coats. Others are reading, though their eyes move slowly across the pages, their attention wandering. The conductor passes through the car, checking tickets with movements so practiced they seem like a kind of meditation. He nods to you as he passes, a small acknowledgement of your presence, and then he is gone, moving on to the next car, continuing his rounds. The light outside is changing. Dawn is coming. Or perhaps it is already here. Or perhaps it has not yet begun. Time feels fluid on this train, elastic, stretching and compressing in ways that have nothing to do with clocks or schedules. An hour might pass in what feels like a moment. A moment might expand to contain an entire lifetime of memories. You remember things you have never experienced. The smell of bread baking in a medieval oven, the sound of horses' hooves on cobblestones, the feel of cold stone beneath your fingers as you climb a spiral staircase in a tower that no longer exists. These are not your memories. They belong to the land you have been traveling through, to the centuries of human life that have been lived in these valleys and on these mountains. Somehow, the journey has made them yours as well. Or perhaps they were always yours, waiting for you to claim them, waiting for you to slow down enough to listen to what the old stones and old paths have to say. The train begins to slow. You are approaching a station, though you cannot remember which one. The platform slides past the window, empty, lit by a single lamp, surrounded by darkness. The train does not stop. It continues through the station and back into the night, and you realize that this is how it will be, an endless journey through a landscape that never quite repeats itself, but never quite changes either. You will pass through stations without stopping, cross bridges over rivers you cannot name, enter tunnels that lead to more tunnels, emerge into valleys that mirror the valleys you have already seen. And this is perfect. This is exactly what you need. Not arrival, but movement. Not destination, but journey. Not waking, but this gentle descent into sleep. This slow dissolution of the boundaries between yourself and the world outside the window. Another passenger stands and makes their way to the door between cars. They open it, and for a moment, you hear the louder clatter of the train on the tracks. Feel the cold air from outside, and then the door closes and the quiet returns. The passenger does not come back. Perhaps they got off at a station you did not notice. Perhaps they moved to a different car. Perhaps they simply disappeared into the night, becoming part of the landscape, joining the long line of travelers who have passed through these mountains and never quite left. Your own reflection appears in the window, ghostly and transparent, superimposed over the darkness outside. You look at it for a moment. Your own face, tired, peaceful, already half asleep. And then you look through it, past it, into the night beyond. There are lights out there, scattered across the hillsides. Farm lights, village lights, the lights of isolated houses where families are sleeping or waking, depending on their rhythms, depending on their work. Each light represents a life, a story, a whole world of experiences and memories and hopes and fears. And you will never know any of them. You will pass by, and they will remain. And in the morning, they will not remember that your train went by in the night. This thought should make you sad, but it does not. Instead, it brings a kind of peace. You are just passing through. You do not need to understand everything. You do not need to know every story. You can let the world be mysterious. You can let Switzerland keep its secrets. You can rest in the knowledge that there is more to the world than you will ever see, more beauty than you will ever experience, more history than you will ever understand, and that is all right. That is how it should be. The train enters another tunnel, The darkness outside becomes absolute. Your reflection disappears from the window. There is only a soft glow of the lights inside the car, the gentle swaying of the train, the sound of wheels on rails becoming slower, becoming quieter, becoming something that is barely there at all. When you close your eyes, the motion continues. You can still feel the train beneath you, still hear its rhythm, but these sensations are fading, becoming part of a dream you are having, or perhaps part of a dream that is having you. You are floating now, suspended between waking and sleeping, between the world of the train and some other world that has no name. In this other world, you are walking through an alpine meadow. The grass is thick and soft beneath your feet. Wildflowers bloom in impossible colors, blues deeper than the sky, yellows brighter than the sun, reds that seem to glow from within. The air smells of honey and herbs. Somewhere nearby, a stream is running, its water clear and cold, tumbling over smooth stones. You can hear cowbells in the distance, their gentle clanging carrying on the wind. You walk without purpose or direction. There is nowhere you need to be. There is nothing you need to do. The meadow extends in all directions, and every direction is the same, and every direction is perfect. The sun is warm on your face, but not too warm. A breeze touches your skin, but not too cold. Everything is exactly as it should be. Everything is balanced. Everything is rest. A path appears beneath your feet, not because you are looking for it, but because it was always there, waiting for you to notice. You follow it without deciding to follow it. The path leads through the meadow and into a forest. The trees are tall and straight, their trunks dark, their branches forming a canopy overhead that filters the sunlight into a soft green glow. The forest floor is covered in moss, springy and silent. Your footsteps make no sound. The cowbells have faded. Even the stream has gone quiet. There is only the whisper of wind in the high branches. A sound so gentle, it might be silence itself. The path winds between the trees, and you follow it deeper into the forest. Time does not exist here. You might have been walking for hours or for seconds. The distinction does not matter. What matters is the walking itself, the simple act of moving through this green space, of being held by the forest, of being part of something larger than yourself. Eventually, though eventually is not quite the right word, the forest begins to thin. The trees grow smaller and more scattered. Light increases. You emerge onto a ridge, and before you, the mountains rise in a perfect line against the sky. Snow covers their peaks, brilliant white against the blue. The sight should take your breath away, but instead it gives you breath, fills your lungs with clear cold air that tastes of ice and stone and distance. You sit on a flat rock at the edge of the ridge. Your legs dangle over empty space. Below, far below, you can see a valley with a silver thread of river running through it, and tiny houses clustered in villages, and fields laid out in geometric patterns. But you are not part of that world anymore. You are here, on this ridge between earth and sky, between waking and sleeping, between the journey and the destination. The sun is setting. You did not notice it moving, but now it is low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. The snow on the mountains turns rose-colored, then purple, then blue. Shadows fill the valley below. Stars begin to appear. First one, then a few, then hundreds, then thousands, until the sky is full of them, a river of light flowing overhead. You lie back on the rock. The stone is still warm from the day's sun. You look up at the stars, and you understand, without words, without thought, that you are looking at the same stars that generations of people have looked at from these mountains. The same stars that medieval monks saw when they left their monasteries at night. The same stars that farmers saw when they walked home from their fields. The same stars that travellers saw when they crossed these passes on foot, risking everything to reach the other side. The stars do not care that you are looking at them. They do not change because you are here. They will continue burning long after you are gone, long after everyone you have ever known is gone, long after the mountains themselves have worn away to nothing. This thought should make you feel insignificant, but it does not. Instead, it makes you feel connected to something vast and permanent, something that does not require your understanding or your attention, something that simply is. Your eyes grow heavier. The stars begin to blur. The last thing you see before sleep takes you completely is a shooting star, a brief streak of light across the darkness, there and gone, like everything else. Like this whole journey, like this perfect moment on the ridge. And then there is only darkness and warmth and the sense of being held by something vast and gentle and utterly indifferent. And that is perfect. That is exactly what you need. That is sleep. The train continues through the night. It will reach its destination eventually. Or perhaps it will not. Perhaps it will continue forever, carrying its sleeping passengers through an endless Switzerland, through valleys and over mountains, through tunnels and across bridges, through a landscape that exists only in the space between waking and dreaming. But you are not there to see it. You are somewhere else now, somewhere deeper, somewhere safe. You are asleep. Rest now. The journey is over. The mountains will be there tomorrow, if you want to return. But tonight, you have travelled far enough. Tonight, you have earned this rest. Sleep. Sleep deeply. Sleep well. All is quiet now. All is dark. All is peace. Good night. But before sleep takes you completely, there are still more places to visit, more corners of Switzerland to wander through. The train has not yet finished its journey, and neither have we. We pull into a small station in the Valais region, where the air carries the scent of apricots from the orchards that line the valley. This is the driest region in Switzerland, sheltered by mountains on all sides. And in summer, the orchards explode with fruit, apricots and pears and apples, all ripening in the intense sun. The farmers here have learned to channel water from the mountains through a system of bisses, narrow wooden channels that follow the contours of the hillsides, bringing glacial meltwater to the thirsty trees. Some of these channels are hundreds of years old, built by hand, hanging impossibly on cliff faces where one false step meant death. Walking beside a bisse is like walking through history, your feet following paths that generations have walked before. The sound of flowing water, constant beside you. The orchards are dark now, the trees just shapes against the starlight, but you can imagine them in full bloom, clouds of white and pink flowers covering the hillsides, the air thick with their perfume. The fruit these trees produce has a flavor unlike fruit grown anywhere else, concentrated by the dry air and intense sun, sweet but with an edge of something wild. something that speaks of this particular soil, this particular climate, this particular place. The farmers make brandy from the fruit, distilling it in copper stills that have been in their families for generations, and the resulting spirit is clear as water, but burns with the warmth of summer captured in liquid form. We walk through one of these orchards, and the moon is bright enough that we can see the shadows of the tree trunks stretching across the ground. Between the trees, wildflowers have grown up, poppies and cornflowers, and wild chamomile. And they release their scent when we brush against them. An owl calls from somewhere in the darkness, a sound both lonely and companionable. The valley is narrow here, and the mountains on either side are close enough that you feel embraced by them, held safe in this protected space. The train takes us higher into the valleys, to the village of Sarsfi, which we glimpsed before, but did not properly visit. This village sits in a cirque of mountains, surrounded by 13 peaks that rise above 13,000 feet, and it has the feel of a place at the very edge of the habitable world. In winter, the sun does not reach the valley floor for months, and the village exists in a permanent blue twilight, lit only by reflected light from the snow on the surrounding peaks. The people who live here year-round develop a different relationship with light than people in sunnier places. They treasure it when it comes, sitting in any patch of sunlight they can find, but they have also learned to live without it, to find beauty in the long blue shadows and the stars that are visible even at midday. There is a glacier here that comes almost to the edge of the village, a river of ice thousands of feet thick, blue-white and ancient. You can walk to the snout of the glacier, where it ends in a chaos of broken ice and meltwater, calving constantly, groaning and cracking as it moves. The sound is unsettling and magnificent, the voice of something vast and inhuman, something that operates on a timescale so different from our own that our entire lives are just moments in its slow progression down the mountain. People come here to see the glacier before it disappears, before warming temperatures melt it entirely, and there is a sadness in their watching, a mourning for something that is dying right in front of us, too slowly to see from moment to moment, but too quickly to stop. The train carries us west from Sarsfi, and we descend back into the main Rhone Valley. We pass through Sion again, but this time we continue past it, following the river downstream toward Lake Geneva. The valley here is famous for its wine, particularly the whites made from the fendant grape, which grows on terraces so steep that all the work must be done by hand. The harvest happens in October, when the air is cool and the leaves on the vines have turned gold and red, and families work together to pick the grapes, carrying them down from the terraces in wooden baskets that cut into their shoulders. The work is hard and the pay is modest, but there is a pride in it, a connection to the land and to the generations who have worked these same terraces before. In the village of Fully, there is a tradition of building stone huts among the vineyards, small shelters where workers can rest during the day and where wine can be stored during the harvest. These huts are built without mortar, just stones carefully fitted together, and some of them are hundreds of years old, slowly settling and leaning, but never quite falling. In summer, families picnic in the shade of these huts, eating bread and cheese and cherries, while looking out over the valley. In autumn, the huts smell of fermenting grapes, a sweet, yeasty smell that attracts wasps and makes your head swim if you stay inside too long. The train brings us to Montreux, which we visited before, but only briefly. This time we stop properly, and we walk along the lakefront promenade, where palm trees sway in the breeze, and flowers bloom year-round thanks to the microclimate. This is the Swiss Riviera, a place that seems to belong more to Italy or France than to Switzerland, but which the Swiss have made their own through their characteristic attention to detail and maintenance. Every flower bed is perfectly weeded, every path is swept clean, every bench is painted and maintained. The promenade extends for miles along the lakeshore, connecting village to village, and you can walk its entire length without ever encountering a piece of litter or a broken railing or anything that might disturb the careful perfection of the scene. Above Montreux, accessible by funicular, stands Rocher de Nez, a mountain peak more than 6,000 feet high, with views across the lake to the French Alps beyond. There is a marmot colony up here, fat alpine rodents that live in burrows among the rocks and sun themselves on warm days, standing on their hind legs like little bears. The marmots whistle to warn each other of danger, a sharp, piercing sound that carries across the mountainside, and when they are startled, they disappear into their burrows with a speed that seems impossible for such round, waddling creatures. In summer, tourists come to feed the marmots and take pictures. But in winter, the animals hibernate, sleeping away the cold months in their underground dens, their heartbeats slowing to just a few beats per minute, their body temperature dropping almost to freezing. We descend from the mountain and board the train once more, traveling east along the northern shore of Lake Geneva. We pass through Lausanne, a city built on steep hills rising from the lake, where the old town is connected to the waterfront by a metro that is one of the steepest in the world. The cathedral in Lausanne is Gothic, built of pale stone that seems to glow at night, and it has retained a medieval tradition. A watchman climbs the tower every night and calls out the aswas from 10 until 2 in the morning, just as watchmen did in the Middle Ages when they were watching for fires. The calls echo across the sleeping city, a reminder of older ways of keeping time, older ways of keeping watch. The vineyards around Lausanne are part of the Lavaux UNESCO World Heritage Site, which we saw earlier from the train, but now we walk among them, following paths that wind between the terraces. Each terrace is held by a stone wall, and each wall is covered in lizards that come out to bask in whatever sun reaches this north-facing slope. The lizards are quick and shy, disappearing into cracks in the wall at the slightest movement, but if you sit very still, they will emerge again, their scales catching the light, their tiny feet gripping the warm stone. Between the rows of vines, wild flowers grow, poppies and cornflowers and wild thyme, and bees move among them, gathering pollen, their hum a gentle counterpoint to the silence. At the eastern end of Lake Geneva, where the Rhone River enters, there is a nature preserve where the river still flows wild and braided, spreading across a wide plain of gravel and sand. This is one of the last places in Switzerland where a major river has not been channeled and controlled, and it serves as a reminder of what the landscape looked like before humans reshaped it. The river here is shallow and fast, running over a bed of white stones, and it is so clear you can see every pebble on the bottom. Birds nest in the gravel bars. Plovers and terns and sandpipers. And in spring the air is full of their calls, their alarm cries and courtship songs creating a constant chorus. The train takes us east from the lake, climbing into the Simmental, a valley famous for its cows. The Simmental breed is one of the oldest cattle breeds in the world, and these cows are enormous, twice the size of the delicate brown cows we saw in Appenzell, with white faces and reddish-brown bodies. They were bred for strength as well as milk. In the days before tractors, these cows pulled ploughs and carts as well as producing milk. And they still have that dual-purpose character, powerful but gentle. In summer, the cows are decorated with flowers and bells for the trip to the high pastures, a celebration called the Alpine procession that draws crowds from across Switzerland. The procession is part religious ceremony, part agricultural necessity, part festival, and it links the present to a past when the movement of animals to the high meadows was essential for survival. We arrive in Gstaad, a resort town that has become synonymous with luxury and celebrity, but which began as a simple farming village. The old chalets still exist, surrounded now by luxury hotels and expensive boutiques, and they serve as a reminder of what this place used to be. These chalets are built in a style unique to the Bernese Oberland. Massive structures with wide overhanging roofs and facades decorated with elaborate wooden carvings. The carvings show flowers and geometric patterns, and sometimes dates and family crests. And they were done by farmers during the long winter months when there was no work in the fields. Each family had its own patterns and traditions, passed down from father to son, and you can tell where a family came from by the style of their carvings. The train carries us north from Gstaad, crossing over into the canton of Fribourg, a region that sits on the border between French-speaking and German-speaking Switzerland. The city of Fribourg itself is built on a dramatic site, perched on a rocky peninsula surrounded on three sides by the Serene River, which flows through a deep gorge far below the city walls. The old bridges across this gorge are marvels of medieval engineering, stone arches spanning hundreds of feet of empty air, built without modern tools or materials, relying only on careful calculation and skilled stonework. Walking across one of these bridges is like walking across a gap in time, your feet on medieval stones, the river roaring far below, the city walls rising ahead. In the lower town of Fribourg, accessible only by steep staircases or funiculars, there are workshops that have been operating in the same buildings for centuries. Tanneries and mills and small manufactories, places where traditional crafts are still practiced. One of these workshops makes parchment, treating animal skins with lime and water and stretching them on frames to dry, creating sheets of writing material that are identical to the parchment used in medieval manuscripts. The workshop smells of wet leather and chemicals, and the work is physical and unpleasant. But the finished parchment is beautiful, smooth and translucent, ready to receive ink and become part of a document that might last for centuries. We leave Fribourg and travel northeast to Bern again, but this time we explore different parts of the city, parts we did not see on our first visit. We walk along the Aar River to a spot where a swimming tradition has developed. In summer, people jump into the river upstream and float down past the old town, letting the current carry them for more than a mile before climbing out. The river is fast and cold, fed by alpine snowmelt, and the swim requires both courage and skill. You must avoid the obstacles in the river, judge the current correctly, know where to exit, but those who do it speak of the thrill, the rush of cold water, the strange perspective of seeing the city from the river, floating past the medieval towers and bridges, in the rose garden above the old town. There is a viewpoint where you can see the entire peninsula of the old city spread out below, the red roofs and grey stone walls, the river wrapping around three sides, the bridges connecting the old town to the new. The garden itself contains hundreds of varieties of roses, planted in formal beds, their scent heavy in the summer air. In June, when the roses are in full bloom, the garden becomes a sea of colour and fragrance, and people come to walk among the beds, to sit on benches and read, to lose themselves in the beauty of it. But at night, when the garden is empty, the roses are just shapes and shadows, their scent fainter, but somehow more precious for being so subtle. The train takes us east from Bern to the city of Thun, which sits at the point where Lake Thun begins, where the Aar River widens and slows and becomes navigable. Thun is a market town, a place where farmers from the surrounding valleys have been coming for centuries to sell their produce and buy what they need. The market still happens weekly, filling the old town square with stalls selling vegetables and cheese and flowers and tools. The vendors call out their prices in the local dialect, a version of Swiss German so thick that even other German speakers struggle to understand it. But you do not need language to participate in the market. You can point and nod and hold up fingers to indicate quantity, and the vendors will understand, will fill your bag with potatoes or apples or whatever you are buying, will count out your change with practiced hands. Above the market square rises Thun Castle, built in the 12th century by the Dukes of Zeringen, and still dominating the town from its hilltop position. The castle's tower is distinctive, with 4 smaller towers at each corner, giving it a crown-like silhouette that is visible for miles. Inside, the castle houses a museum of local history, displaying everything from Stone Age tools to medieval weapons to 19th century furniture. The exhibits are old-fashioned, with handwritten labels and artifacts displayed in wooden cases. But there is a charm in this old-fashioned approach, a feeling that the museum has not changed much since the 1950s, that it exists outside the modern world's obsession with interactive displays and multimedia presentations. We board a boat in Thun and travel across Lake Thun to Interlaken, passing the time on deck, watching the mountains rise on both sides of the lake. The peaks here are lower than in the high Alps, more forested, more gentle, but still impressive in their scale. Small villages line the shore, each one with a church and a boat dock, and a few houses clustered around a square. Some of these villages are only accessible by boat, cut off from the road network, and they maintain a slower pace of life as a result. The people who live there are used to planning around the boat schedule, to carrying everything they need on foot from the dock to their houses, to being slightly isolated from the rest of the world. At Interlaken, we disembark and walk through the town, which has been a tourist destination since the early 1800s, when English travellers discovered the beauty of the Alps and began coming here to admire the views. The town is still full of grand hotels built in that era. Enormous structures with hundreds of rooms and dining rooms that can seat hundreds. Built to accommodate the wealthy tourists who came for weeks or months at a time. Many of these hotels have been renovated and modernized, but they retain their essential character. Formal lobbies with marble columns, wood-paneled lounges with fireplaces, dining rooms with crystal chandeliers. Staying in one of these hotels is like stepping back in time to an era when travel was slower and more luxurious, when people dressed for dinner and observed formal etiquette. From Interlaken, the train takes us up to the Schilthorn, a peak made famous by a James Bond film in the 1960s. The mountain is not particularly high by alpine standards, but it offers panoramic views of the Eiger, Munch, and Jungfrau peaks. And on the summit stands a revolving restaurant where you can sit and watch the view rotate slowly around you as you eat. The restaurant completes one full rotation every 45 minutes, which is just slow enough that you do not really notice the movement unless you look at the same mountain for several minutes. At night, when the restaurant is closed and the tourists have gone, the summit is silent and empty, lit only by the stars and the distant lights of valleys far below. We descend from the Schilthorn and return to the valley, boarding our train once more. We travel south now, following the route of the Lötschberg Tunnel, which burrows under the Bernese Alps to connect the German-speaking north with the Italian-speaking south. The tunnel is nearly 9 miles long, and the journey through it takes about 15 minutes. 15 minutes of darkness and the steady rhythm of the train on the tracks. When we emerge, the landscape has changed completely. We are in the valley again, but on the sunny side of the Alps, where the weather is drier and warmer and the vegetation more Mediterranean. We pass through the town of Visp, where several valleys meet and where the railway line splits. One branch going to Zermatt, another to Sarsfi, a third continuing down the Rhone Valley. Visp is a junction town, a place defined by movement and passage, where people are always coming and going, changing trains, heading to the mountains or leaving them. The station is busy even at night, with trains arriving and departing, with travellers sleeping on benches, with the electronic boards constantly updating to show the next departures. We take the line that goes to Zermatt, climbing through a valley that grows narrower and steeper as we ascend. The train is a special model, a cogwheel train that can handle the steep grades, and you can hear the difference in its operation. A slower, more laboured sound as the cog engages with the rack rail, pulling the train up inclines that would be impossible for a normal train. Through the window, the landscape becomes more alpine with each passing mile. The meadows give way to rock, the trees thin and disappear, the peaks close in on both sides. We arrive in Zermatt once again, but this time we explore parts of the village we did not see before. We walk to the old part of town, where wooden granaries stand on stilts with flat mushroom-shaped stones between the stilts and the building. These stones are rat guards, designed to prevent rodents from climbing up into the granary and eating the stored grain. The granaries are dark with age, their wood blackened by centuries of smoke and weather, and they lean at improbable angles, settling into the ground over time. Some are still used for storage, but others have been converted into vacation, chalets or restaurants. Their interiors modernized while their exteriors remain unchanged. In the Zermatt cemetery, we find the graves of the climbers who died on the first ascent of the Matterhorn, and we stand there for a moment in silence, honoring their memory. The graves are simple, just names and dates, and a few words about how they died. There are no elaborate monuments, no angels or crosses, just stone markers in the grass. Other climbers have left mementos, carabiners and pieces of rope, photographs and flowers, small tributes to men they never knew, but whose legacy they carry forward every time they climb. From Zermatt, we take a different train, one that goes not up to the Gornergrat, but down the valley to Tesch, the last town before Zermatt, where cars are allowed. This is where visitors must park and take the train for the final stretch. And the town has organized itself entirely around this function. Enormous parking garages dominate the landscape, surrounded by hotels and restaurants designed to accommodate people who are just passing through. Tesch has a utilitarian character, a sense that it exists only to serve Zermatt, and there is something honest about this, something refreshingly unpretentious in a region full of carefully maintained beauty. The train carries us down the valley to the Rhône, and we follow the river downstream, passing through towns we have seen before, but from different angles, at different times of night, so that they look both familiar and strange. We pass Sion and Martigny, Montreux and Vevey, and finally we arrive back at Geneva, where the Rhône flows out of the lake and continues its journey to the Mediterranean. Geneva is Switzerland's most international city, home to the United Nations and countless international organizations, a place where more than 40% of the population is foreign-born. The city has a cosmopolitan character that sets it apart from the rest of Switzerland, with restaurants serving food from every continent, with shops selling goods from around the world, with a constant multilingual buzz of international meetings and conferences. But underneath this international veneer, Geneva is still Swiss, orderly, clean, efficient, punctual. The trams run on time. The streets are safe. The parks are immaculate. We walk along the lakeshore to the Jet d'eau, the enormous fountain that shoots water more than 400 feet into the air, visible from miles away. The fountain operates only during the day, but at night the mechanism is still there, waiting, and you can stand at its base and imagine the force of the water that will erupt from this spot when morning comes. The lakeshore is quiet now. The joggers and cyclists and tourists all gone, and there is just the sound of small waves lapping against the stone embankment, the lights of the city reflecting on the water's surface. In the old town of Geneva, we climb to the Cathedral of Saint-Pierre, where John Calvin preached during the Reformation, changing the course of European history. The cathedral is austere, stripped of the decoration it had before the Reformation, when it was Catholic. No statues, no paintings, no gold, just stone and wood and light, the Protestant aesthetic of simplicity and focus. In the crypt beneath the cathedral, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of earlier buildings, a Roman temple, a Christian basilica, centuries of construction and reconstruction, layered one on top of another. You can walk through these remains, seeing how the building has evolved over 2,000 years, each generation leaving its mark. We leave Geneva by train, heading east one final time, traveling through the night along the northern shore of the lake. We pass through Lausanne again, and Vevey and Montreux, and then we begin to climb into the mountains, following a different route this time, one that takes us through valleys we have not yet seen. We arrive in Gstaad from our different direction, and from there we continue east into the Bernese Oberland, climbing higher and higher, until we are back in the high Alps, back in the realm of ice and stone. The train climbs to the Furka Pass, one of the highest road passes in Switzerland, where the road switches back and forth up the mountainside, gaining elevation with each turn. At the top, there is a hotel that is open only in summer, when the pass is clear of snow, and in winter it sits empty and frozen, buried under drifts sometimes 20 feet deep. From the Furka Pass, we can see the Rhone Glacier, the source of the Rhone River that we have been following off and on throughout our journey. The glacier is small compared to what it once was, retreating rapidly year by year, leaving behind a landscape of bare rock and gravel. There is a grotto carved into the ice, a tourist attraction where you can walk inside the glacier itself through tunnels of blue ice. But the grotto must be recarved each year as the glacier moves and melts. Standing inside the ice, you can see the layers, the annual snowfall compressed and frozen, creating bands of lighter and darker blue that record the glacier's history like tree rings. The train descends from the Furka Pass and brings us to Andermatt, a town that has been important for centuries because of its position at the intersection of several major alpine passes. From here, you can reach Italy via the Gotthard or the St. Gotthard, Germany via the Oberalp, and France via the Furka. For centuries, Andermatt was full of inns and stables, places where travellers could rest and change horses before continuing their journey. Some of those old inns still exist, converted into hotels, their thick stone walls and vaulted ceilings preserved, their interiors updated with modern amenities. We board the Glacier Express, the famous scenic train that connects St. Moritz with Zermatt, travelling across the heart of the Swiss Alps. The journey takes nearly 8 hours, passing through 91 tunnels and crossing 291 bridges, climbing to a maximum elevation of more than 6,600 feet. The train moves slowly, averaging less than 25 miles per hour, giving passengers time to absorb the views that unfold outside the windows. We have the train almost to ourselves at this hour, just a few other travellers scattered through the cars, all of us quiet, all of us lost in our own thoughts. The route takes us over the Oberalp Pass, the highest point on the journey, where the landscape is bare and windswept, with snow visible even in summer. The train slows to walking pace here, giving us time to see the small lake at the summit, frozen solid even now, its surface reflecting the stars. Then we begin the descent, dropping down into the Surselva Valley, where the Rhine is just a small stream, barely wider than you could jump across. We pass through villages with names in Romansh, the ancient language of this region, Dicentis and Sumvit and Trun, and each village has a white church with a bell tower, and each church is surrounded by houses built in the traditional Romansh style, with walls of rough stone and roofs of wooden shingles. These villages feel remote, cut off from the modern world by the mountains that surround them, and they maintain traditions that have been lost elsewhere, traditional costumes worn on feast days, old songs sung in the Romansh language, festivals that mark the changing of the seasons. The train follows the Rhine downstream through a spectacular gorge, where the river has cut through limestone and created a canyon hundreds of feet deep. The walls of the gorge are pale grey, almost white, and they rise straight from the water, covered in places with moss and ferns that grow in the spray from the rapids. The train clings to one wall of the gorge, running on a narrow shelf blasted from the rock, and looking down, you can see the river far below, its water white with foam. We emerge from the gorge at Schur, which we visited before, and from there the route continues south, climbing back into the mountains, heading towards St. Moritz. We pass through a series of small villages, each one more isolated than the last, until we are in true wilderness, surrounded by peaks that have no names that anyone remembers. This is the heart of the Alps, the part that remains untamed, where glaciers carve into lakes and avalanches thunder down mountainsides, and the weather changes from hour to hour with a violence that is both terrifying and exhilarating. The train brings us finally to St. Moritz, where we began this leg of the journey, and we have completed a circle, returned to where we started, though we are not the same as when we left. How could we be? We have travelled through centuries and across landscapes that span the entire range of what this small country contains. We have seen mountains and valleys, lakes and rivers, cities and villages. We have walked through medieval streets and modern stations, have stood beside glaciers and in libraries, have felt the spray of waterfalls and the silence of empty chapels. And now it is time to return, time to make our way back to whatever place we call home. The train waits for us, patient and ready, and we board one final time. The journey back is different from the journey out. We are too tired to pay attention to every detail, too full of images to absorb more. The landscape passes outside the window, mountains and forests, villages and fields, but we see it all through a haze of fatigue, through eyes that are already half closed, ready for sleep. The rhythm of the train becomes a lullaby. The sound of the wheels on the rails becomes a heartbeat. The gentle swaying of the car becomes the rocking of a cradle. We sink deeper into our seats, our heads tilting to rest against the window, our breathing slowing, our minds drifting. Outside, Switzerland continues its ancient patterns. The mountains stand, the rivers flow, the villages sleep and wake. Time moves forward, carrying everything with it, changing everything slowly but inexorably. But you are not part of that forward movement anymore. You are moving backward, toward rest, toward stillness, toward sleep. The stars fade, the sky lightens, dawn comes, bringing colour back to the world. Pinks and golds and blues, but you do not see it. Your eyes are closed. Your breathing is deep and regular. You have left the waking world behind. The train continues its journey, carrying you toward whatever destination you chose when you boarded, but it does not matter where that destination is. What matters is that you are here, now, in this moment of perfect rest, suspended between departure and arrival, between one place and another, between waking and sleeping. And in this suspension, there is peace, complete peace. Sleep now. The journey is done. Switzerland will be waiting when you wake. But for now, just sleep. Sleep. deeply. Sleep well. Rest. Before the final rest comes, there remain a few more threads of Switzerland to weave into this tapestry of night. The train carries us through regions we have only glimpsed, through valleys that deserve more than a passing glance. We find ourselves in the Engadin Valley again, but this time in winter's grip, when the lakes freeze and the entire valley transforms into a white wilderness. The frozen lakes become highways across the landscape, their surfaces covered in snow that the wind has sculpted into waves and drifts. Cross-country skiers glide across these frozen surfaces, their movements almost silent, just the whisper of skis on snow and the rhythm of their breathing. In the villages, smoke rises straight up from chimneys on windless days, columns of grey against the blue sky, and the air smells of burning larch wood, sweet and resinous. Near Pontresina, there is a valley where stone pines grow, trees that can live for 1,000 years, their trunks twisted by centuries of wind, their needles dark green against the snow. The Swiss call these trees Arven, and they prize the wood for its scent and durability, using it to line rooms and make furniture that will last for generations. Walking through an Arven forest is like walking through a cathedral. The trees space widely, their branches interlocking overhead, the ground beneath them free of undergrowth because nothing else can compete with their roots. In summer, the forest floor is covered in alpine roses and blueberries, but in winter, it is just snow and the dark trunks of the trees, standing silent and patient, waiting for spring. We travel west into the Avers Valley, the highest inhabited valley in Europe, where a handful of villages cling to existence at elevations above 6,000 feet. The villages here are tiny. A dozen houses, a church, a school that serves maybe 10 children. The winters are long and harsh, the snow sometimes lasting from October to May, and the people who choose to live here do so for reasons that are hard to articulate. They speak of the quality of the light, the purity of the air, the sense of being connected to something essential. They speak of traditions maintained, of a way of life that has meaning precisely because it is difficult. In the village of Juf, the highest year-round settlement in Switzerland, there is a small museum dedicated to the history of the valley. The museum is housed in an old barn, and its exhibits are simple. Photographs of families who lived here, tools they used, clothing they wore. There is a sledge that was used to transport hay down from the high meadows before there were roads. There is a loom where women wove wool from their own sheep into cloth for their families. There is a cradle where generations of children slept, carved from a single piece of pine and polished smooth by use. These objects speak of self-sufficiency, of people who made what they needed because there was no other choice, who adapted to their environment because the environment would not adapt to them. The train carries us back to lower elevations, and we follow the Rhine downstream once more. But this time, we explore the side valleys that feed into it. We travel up the Safiental, a valley so remote that it maintained its own dialect of Romansh, until recently, when the last native speakers died. The valley is narrow and steep-sided, with meadows on the valley floor and forests climbing the slopes. In autumn, the forests turn gold and red, and the contrast with the dark green of the pine trees creates a tapestry of color that seems almost too vivid to be real. At the head of the valley stands a small alp, a high pasture where cows spend the summer months. The Alp has a hut where the herdsman lives during the summer, making cheese from the milk the cows produce. The hut is simple. One room with a bed and a table and a fireplace, and next to it, a stone-floored room where the cheese is made and aged. The herdsman lives alone up here for 3 months each year, seeing other people only when someone hikes up to visit or when he walks down to the village for supplies. He speaks of the solitude as something precious, a chance to think and be still, to live according to rhythms dictated by the animals and the weather rather than by clocks and calendars. We descend from the Safiental and continue north, following the Rhine toward the Rhine Falls that we visited before. But this time, we stop at Schaffhausen, the medieval town that sits just upstream from the falls. Schaffhausen is famous for its oriel windows, elaborate, covered windows that project from the facades of buildings, decorated with carved wood and painted designs. These windows were a status symbol in the Middle Ages, showing that the owner of the building was wealthy enough to afford the extra materials, and skilled craftsmen needed to create them. The windows also served a practical purpose, allowing people inside to look down the street in both directions without being seen, and creating a covered space where you could sit and watch the world go by. The old town of Schaffhausen is remarkably well preserved, with entire streets of buildings from the 15 and 1600s, their facades painted with frescoes that have been maintained and restored over the centuries. One building shows a knight on horseback, another shows a hunting scene, a third shows an allegory of the virtues. Walking through these streets is like walking through an open-air museum, except that the buildings are still in use, still serving their original purposes or adapted to modern needs. We leave Schaffhausen and travel south into the Zurich Oberland, a region of gentle hills and small lakes between Zurich and the Alps. This is dairy country, similar to the Emmental, but smaller in scale. And the farms here produce milk for the cheese that is made in small dairies scattered throughout the region. We stop at one of these dairies in the village of Rapperswil and watch the cheesemaker at work. He heats the milk in a copper vat, watching the temperature carefully, stirring with a long wooden paddle. When the temperature is right, he adds rennet, and the milk begins to curdle almost immediately, transforming from liquid to solid in front of our eyes. He cuts the curds with a wire cutter, then heats them again, stirring constantly until they reach the right consistency. Then he drains off the whey and presses the curds into molds, where they will stay for hours, being turned and pressed until they form into solid wheels of cheese. The cheesemaker is young, maybe 30, and he learned his trade from his father, who learned from his father before him. He speaks of the work with a mixture of pride and worry. Pride because he is carrying on a tradition, creating a product that people have been making in this region for centuries. Worry because he does not know if his own children will want to continue the work, if they will find meaning in these long hours and physical labor when there are easier ways to make a living. From Rapperswil, we travel east to the Toggenburg Valley, a region famous for its folk music and yodeling traditions. The valley is home to several yodeling clubs, groups that meet regularly to practice and perform the traditional songs of the region. We attend a practice session in a village hall where a dozen men and women gather to sing. They do not use instruments, just their voices, creating complex harmonies that weave in and out of each other, rising and falling in patterns that seem mathematical in their precision. The yodeling itself is wordless, just pure sound, but it conveys emotion, joy and longing, and a deep connection to this landscape. After the practice, one of the singers explains the different types of yodels. There is the nature jodel, which imitates the sounds of nature, the call of birds, the rush of water, the whistle of wind through rocks. There is the yuxa, a short, high yodel used to call across distances. There is the slower, more melodic yodel used in songs. Each type has its own rules and traditions, passed down orally from generation to generation. And learning to yodel properly takes years of practice and a deep understanding of the musical traditions of the region. The train carries us higher into the Toggenburg, to the Chasarug mountain, where a cable car takes us to the summit. At the top, there is a restaurant designed by a famous architect, all glass and steel and clean lines, perched on the edge of a cliff with views across the entire region. The contrast between the ultra-modern building and the ancient landscape is intentional, meant to highlight both, and it succeeds. From the restaurant terrace, you can see a dozen mountain ranges, 100 villages, lakes and rivers and forests stretching to the horizon. The sun is setting as we stand there, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and pink, and the mountains turn from white to gold to deep blue as the light fades. We descend from the Chasarug and travel east to Appenzell, which we visited before, but only briefly. This time, we explore the town properly, walking through streets where every building is painted in bright colors and decorated with elaborate folk art. The tradition here is to paint scenes on the facades of buildings, scenes of alpine life, of festivals and processions, of cows and farmers and traditional costumes. The paintings are not just decorative, they tell stories, preserve history, document a way of life that is slowly disappearing. In Appenzell, we attend a Landsgemeinde, an open-air assembly where all citizens gather to vote on laws and elect officials by a show of hands. This is one of the last places in Switzerland where direct democracy is practiced in its most literal form, where every citizen has the right to speak and to vote, where decisions are made collectively in a single day of discussion and voting. The assembly meets in a town square, and citizens gather there early in the morning, standing for hours as officials read out proposals and citizens debate them. When it is time to vote, everyone raises their right hand, and officials count the hands to determine the outcome. It is democratic participation at its most immediate and visible, and there is something powerful about seeing thousands of people gathered together, participating in the governance of their community. We leave Appenzell and travel south one final time, climbing back into the high Alps, returning to Zermatt. But instead of stopping in the village, the train continues past it, climbing even higher, following a route that takes us to the Gornergrat, and then beyond, onto a track that runs along the glacier itself. This is a special route, used only for maintenance and scientific research, and we are privileged to travel it. The train moves slowly across the ice, its special wheels designed to grip the frozen surface. Outside the windows, The glacier stretches in all directions, its surface broken into crevasses and ice towers, shaped by movement and melt into a landscape that seems more alien than earthly. The color of the ice changes as we travel, sometimes white, sometimes blue, sometimes a pale green that seems to glow from within. In places, rocks are embedded in the ice, carried down from the mountains above, and these rocks make dark trails across the white surface, telling the story of the glacier's movement. We stop at a research station on the glacier, a small hut where scientists come to study the ice, drilling cores and measuring movement and documenting the retreat. One of the scientists shows us an ice core, a cylinder of ice drilled from deep in the glacier, and she explains how they can read the history of the climate in the layers of ice. Each layer represents a year of snowfall, and trapped in the ice are bubbles of ancient air, pollen from long ago springs, dust from volcanic eruptions thousands of miles away. The ice holds memories, she says, memories of climates and ecosystems that no longer exist. And as the glacier melts, those memories are being lost forever. We leave the glacier and return to Zermatt, and from there the train takes us on one final journey, a route that connects Zermatt with the Gornergrat, and then continues north, descending through a series of valleys back toward lower elevations. The route passes through tunnels and over bridges, through forests and meadows, through villages that are sleeping and villages that are waking. The sun is rising now, the first light touching the peaks and turning them gold, and we watch the transformation from darkness to light, from night to day. But we are not part of that day. We are passengers on a night train, and even though the sun is rising, for us it is still night, still the time of quiet and rest and the gentle rhythm of wheels on not rails. We sink deeper into our seats, our eyes growing heavier, our thoughts becoming more fragmented and dreamlike. The train passes through a final valley, and ahead we can see our destination, though it is too distant and too blurred by fatigue to recognize. It does not matter where we are going. It only matters that we are in motion, that the train is carrying us, that we can release our hold on consciousness and drift into sleep, knowing that we will arrive safely, that the train knows the way, even if we do not. And so we sleep. Finally, completely, deeply, we sleep. The train continues through the Swiss morning, carrying its sleeping passengers toward whatever destinations they have chosen. But those destinations are no longer important. What is important is this moment, this space between waking and sleeping, this gentle surrender to rest. Outside, Switzerland turns through another day. The mountains stand unchanging. The rivers flow toward the sea. The farmers rise and go to their work. The bells ring in the church towers. Life continues as it has for centuries, as it will for centuries more, patient and persistent and indifferent to our presence or absence. But inside the train, there is only peace, only rest, only the deep, dreamless sleep that comes after a long journey, after seeing much and feeling much, and finally being able to let it all go. Sleep now. There is nothing more to see, nothing more to do. Just sleep. Sleep deeply. Sleep well. The mountains will be there when you wake. The valleys will be there. The lakes and rivers and forests will all still exist, waiting for your return. But for now, they can wait. For now, you need only sleep. Good night, traveller. Rest well. Your journey through Switzerland is complete. Yet before sleep claims you entirely, there is one more image to hold, one more memory to carry into dreams. We are standing on a ridge somewhere in the Bernese Oberland, in that hour between night and morning, when the world is neither dark nor light, but suspended in between. Below us, a sea of clouds fills the valleys, hiding the towns and villages, leaving only the peaks visible, islands of rock rising from a white ocean. The peaks catch the first light of dawn, turning pink and gold, while the clouds below remain grey and shadowless. This is a phenomenon the Swiss call the Nebelmeer, the sea of fog, and it happens on autumn mornings when the valleys are cool and the upper air is warm, creating an inversion that traps moisture below a certain elevation. Standing above this layer, you feel both isolated and connected, isolated from the human world hidden beneath the clouds, connected to something larger and older, to the mountains themselves, and the sky above them, and the ancient dance of weather and geology that has shaped this landscape. We watch as the sun rises higher and the light spreads across the sea of clouds, transforming it from grey to white to gold. In places, the clouds begin to break apart, revealing glimpses of the valleys beneath. A patch of forest, a village church tower, a stretch of river catching the light. But these glimpses are brief, and then the clouds close again, keeping their secrets, maintaining their veil between the world above and the world below. A chamois appears on the ridge near us, a wild mountain goat with curved horns and a coat the colour of chocolate. It pauses to look at us, its eyes dark and calm, unafraid. For a moment, we are part of its world, sharing this ridge and this view and this perfect morning light. Then it bounds away, disappearing among the rocks with a grace that seems impossible for something so solid. And we are alone again, just us and the mountains and the sea of clouds. The air is thin up here, and breathing requires attention. Each breath a conscious act. But the air is also clean, scrubbed by wind and distance of everything except oxygen and cold. It tastes of stone and ice, and the vast distances between here and the stars that are still faintly visible overhead, refusing to fade even as the sun rises. We could stay here. We could watch the day arrive fully, could see the clouds burn off and the valleys revealed. But that is not why we came. We came for the night and the quiet and the gentle journey through darkness toward rest. The day belongs to someone else. The day is for waking and working and all the busy activities of human life. For us, there is only this final moment of stillness before sleep, this pause on the ridge above the clouds, and then the long, slow descent into dreams. So we turn from the view and make our way back to the train. It is waiting where we left it, patient and ready. Its doors open, its interior warm and lit. We board for the final time, finding our seats by memory rather than sight, settling in with the ease of long familiarity. The doors close. The train begins to move, and we are in motion again, descending from the ridge, entering the sea of clouds, leaving the peaks and the dawn light behind. Inside the clouds, the world disappears. There is only whiteness outside the windows, a complete absence of reference points, and the train seems to float rather than travel, suspended in milk, moving through a space that has no dimensions and no directions. It is disorienting and comforting at the same time, this complete surrender of navigation and control, this trust that the train knows where it is going, even when we cannot see the way. Time behaves strangely in the clouds. Minutes might be hours. Hours might be seconds. The train might be moving or standing still. There is no way to tell and no reason to care. You float in whiteness and trust and the gentle rhythm of wheels on invisible rails, and you let yourself drift, your eyes closing, your breathing deepening, your mind releasing its grip on the waking world. When you next open your eyes, and you cannot say when that is, cannot say how much time has passed, the train has emerged from the clouds and is moving through a landscape you recognize without knowing why. Meadows and forests, villages and rivers, mountains in the distance. This could be anywhere in Switzerland. This could be everywhere. The specific names and locations do not matter anymore. What matters is the feeling of the place, the sense of being held by ancient rhythms, of moving through a landscape that has been shaped by time and weather and human care into something that feels both wild and tamed, both dangerous and safe. Your fellow passengers are all sleeping now. The conductor has dimmed the lights to almost nothing. The train moves quietly, respectfully, not wanting to disturb this collective rest. Outside, the Swiss morning continues its patient unfolding, but inside the train, night persists, held in place by closed eyes and steady breathing and the gentle rocking of the cars. You close your eyes again, and this time, you do not open them. This time, you surrender completely to sleep, trusting that the train will take you where you need to go, trusting that when you wake, you will be safely arrived at whatever destination you chose, trusting that all will be well, and it will be well. The train knows its route. The tracks are true. The signals are green. There is nothing to worry about and nothing to fear. There is only the journey and the rest and the deep peace of letting go. So let go now. Release your grip on consciousness. Allow yourself to sink into sleep, like sinking into dark water, like disappearing into velvet, like becoming one with the night itself. The train carries you. Switzerland holds you. Sleep takes you. And you are gone, finally, completely, into the dreamless dark where all journeys end and all travelers rest. Good night. Sleep well. Until we meet again.